Hey guys, Ryan with Cycle News. Welcome to another first ride review. Today we've just jumped off Honda's CRF250RX and CRF450RX models. Now before we get into this video, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. Drop a comment if you have any questions about the bike below. And as always, check out the Cycle News website where we have 50 free issues of Cycle News. We have a full spec sheet, photos, and a written review if you'd like to read. Check that out at cyclenews.com. All right, let's get into the video. So the CRF-RX line was introduced back in the last generation of the Honda models. So that was in 2017, and it basically bridges the gap between Honda's R motocross model and the X, which was the cross-country model. The RX is basically a blend of the two, and it's Honda's specific cross-country race bike. So both of the RX models are heavily based off the R, and they would basically be the cousins, R and the RX, and now the L and the X, which we'll get to later. Those two bikes are basically relatives. So for 2023, both bikes received minimal changes. They have handguards, kickstands, an 18-inch rear wheel, which is better for off-road racing, a 2.1 gallon fuel tank, which is bigger than the standard 1.7 gallon fuel tank that comes on the R. It also has softer suspension settings and a little bit different mapping, we've been told, to kind of better fit the off-road riding. So we did this event down at Chocolate Mountain Ranch. This event kind of coincided with another event, which was Johnny Campbell's 30th anniversary with Honda. And Johnny Campbell is an off-road legend. He's one of the nicest guys in the pits, and he has a direct hand in the development of the RX lineup. His team, Johnny Campbell Racing, they race a lot of the West Coast off-road races out here, the Grand Prix and the desert racing, and their team races the RX models and the X models. So Johnny has a direct hand in what goes on with these bikes, and he's really helped the development of both of these machines. So riding these bikes, Honda laid out about a 15-minute loop for us to ride, a little mix of some motocross track, a little mix of the off-road loop, and we got to ride both of these bikes back to back. So we did this test right after we did our 250F motocross shootout. So it was actually really fun to be able to ride the 250RX directly after we had spent some time on the 250R. And what I noticed specifically with the RX is that everything we complained about with the R, the X kind of solved. You know, the suspension was a little bit too stiff for my liking on the R, which actually kind of dropped it down in the rankings, where the RX was actually a lot softer and just easier to ride. It wasn't as harsh and stiff as the R was. The RX had a lot more, ease ability to ride. You can get through that single track stuff a lot easier. Maybe on the motocross track it wouldn't be as great because it would be a little bit softer and it would hit through some of the stroke in some sections. But for the off-road riding, it was super fun. I put it in the aggressive map and used that for most of the day just to get a little bit extra out of that 250 small bore engine. The wide tank didn't really hinder my riding or anything. Meaning when you're standing up, you don't feel it anyways. When you sit down, it does feel a little bit wider, but for you off-road guys that are already riding with a desert tank, it's not really gonna be a big deal. And in fact, it really just feels kind of like a stock Yamaha does. So the stock Yamaha does feel a little bit wider, and then the Honda with the 2.1 gallon fuel tank does feel pretty good. Maybe a little bit wider, a little bit more stable, I guess, in the cockpit. But like I said, if you already ride with a desert tank, it's not gonna be a big deal. The 18-inch rear wheel in the back definitely helps with some bump absorption, and also that taller sidewall is going to help eliminate some pinch flats and stuff that you'd find riding in rocks and rooted sections. So that was a nice mod to have. And the thing with both of the RX models is they're only $300 more than the standard R model. So having handguards, a fuel tank, a kickstand, the 18-inch rear wheel for only $300 more does seem like a pretty big deal. I did do some research on an IMS tank. Those are about $350. So just that alone would set you back if you were trying to make an R and RX. So everything that we liked about the 250RX basically transferred right over to the 450RX as well. The 450R model got a little bit of updates this year in the engine department. It smoothed it out, they updated some suspension settings, and those are directly reflected onto the RX. So that bike is a little more mellow, which is kind of what you want for some tight single track riding. And like you GNCC guys, you don't need that wide open speed sometimes. The Honda does have 3 different map settings and 3 different traction control settings, which are really good, especially if you're getting out in that faster, West Coast Grand Prix style racing, or if you're taking this bike to the motocross track. The softer suspension settings were definitely well liked on these tight single track sections and just made the bike overall easier to ride. Hondas are a little bit stiff-natured how they come, so having a little bit softer setting in the bike made it a little bit easier to turn and just easier to move around on some of these tighter sections. The right customer for this bike, in my opinion, is somebody who races the West Coast off-road scene, like Grand Prix or some kind of enduro riding, or guys on the East Coast that are doing more GNCC style or sprint enduro kind of races. The X now is more of the dual sport trail version. Think of like the CRF F line. That would be like a 450F, if that makes sense. The R would be definitely a specific motocross bike. It's stiff, it's fast, it's racy, where the RX is a little bit more relaxed. I think if guys are still riding a motocross track every once in a while or taking it out with their buddies, the RX is gonna be a perfect bike for you. It's nice to see the Japanese brands like Honda, Kawasaki, and Yamaha taking a hard stance against the KTMs and the Austrian bikes who have really dominated the off-road scene for a long time now. The RX is a direct competitor to those bikes and will continue to be a bike that is going to be a nice offering for guys that maybe don't want to race motocross, or guys who are weekend warriors who want to take this, have the performance of a 450R, but have a little bit specific setting to go ride off-road. Thanks guys for watching. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. Check out the Cycle News magazine where you'll find a full write-up with photos, spec sheet, and a written review. And until next time, we'll catch you out on the track.